All right, so now before we get started with um, implementing the front end part of our authentication, it's important we have a plan as to how we want to access data from the back end. So in this project, we're going to use Redux create async thunk to fetch data, but I wanted us to actually have a taste of how we can also fetch data or how we can also interact with our backend without the create async thunk. So for the authentication, I'm just going to have, you know, within my component here, I'm going to interact with the backend and then I'll just save some data to Redux. But when we now get to working with the product, in other words, fetching the products, creating products, deleting products, we're going to do that completely with create async thunk of Redux, and then everything will just be stored in Redux itself. So I just want us to at least have some variety when it comes to, interacting with our back end. But anyhow it goes, even if you want to be able to handle the authentication and everything entirely with Redux create async thunk, you will still be able to implement that by the time this course is finished, because you're going to understand it from when we work with the products area. So now what I'll do is I would remember we created the slice, the auth slice, I think. So let me just search for that slice. Yeah, so we created this auth slice sometime when we started. So in this auth slice, I'm just going to prepare this file for, let me just expand this a little bit. I'm going to prepare this file for um, our authentication. So the first state we're going to have here is logged in, and it's going to just check whether a user is going to save whether a user is logged in or not. If a user is logged in, it's going to be true. If the user is not logged in, it's going to be false. So but what I'll do is I'll create some other state. So here I'll create a name state, so name, and this name state I want to be able to save it in local storage. I want to be able to access it in local storage. So what we can do now is I'll just come down here like this, and then I'll just create a variable. I'll say const name, and that's going to be equal to, so if we want to get an item from a local storage, we have to first pass it. So I'll say JSON dot parse, and then I'll just get the item from local storage. So we'll say local storage dot get item, and the item we want to get from the local storage is the name. Okay, so that's what we're going to save it as. Now in this state here, we're now going to say that check the local storage first. So I'll say check for name in the local storage, which is this guy here we're referencing, and then if you find a name, use that name, else make the name an empty string. We just use ternary operator here. So it's logged in state, name state, they are stored separately. Now I will now store all the data about the user, right? So here I'll just say user, and I'll just open that up. So the user is going to have all the properties about the user. We're going to store it. So the name of the user, we'll store that here. It's initially going to be an empty string. So let me just duplicate this 4 times, I think. And here we're just also going to store the email of the user, then the phone number of the user, then the bio, then lastly we're going to store the photo. Okay, so that's it. Then I'm not sure if I needed the user ID for anything. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, let me just have the user ID variable. I can't remember if I used it for anything, so but it doesn't hurt to just have it here first. So the user ID, great. So now these are the states that we're going to use for the authentication of our what's it called, website or the app. Now we need to create some reducers that will be able to do something in the front end. So inside these reducers, we're going to open it up and we're going to create some actions. It's actually actions, I should have said. So now the actions we're creating, the first is, I'll call it set login. So set and then underscore login. So let's just open this up. This is going to take a state. It's going to take a state and an action, and then we'll just open that up like this. So what do we want to do when a user logs in? Well, I want to set this login to true, and I'm going to send a payload. When I call this action, I'll send a payload to this action here, and then I will now set the login to what that payload is. So for example, if I send a request to the back end to check whether the user is logged in other words, to get the login status, if that request comes as true, I will just set this login to true. Okay, so here I'm just going to say state dot is logged in, and I'll set that to whatever the action dot payload is. So action dot payload. Okay, so that's it for this one. Then the next piece of action I'm going to create will be to set the name of the user. And the reason why I'm actually setting the name of the user and even saving it to local storage is that there are several points in our application where we would need to display the name of the user, right? And I would not want to be making independent requests every time you move to maybe a certain part of your application. So that's why I just get that username, save it in the local storage, and then it can be accessed from anywhere without making a new request. Another thing is, if the user refreshes the page for any reason, you don't want to make an independent request to your backend just because you want to get the username. So just have that in the local storage ab initio. So now let's create an action that will set the username. So here I'm just going to say set name name. Aha. So now, of course, what we need here is we want to say state.name, or this should be small letter, so state.name, and it's going to be the action.payload as well. But remember, when we get to the action.payload, we want to save it to local storage first. So I'll just come here and just save that to local storage. So I'll say local storage, and then this is going to be dot set item. Aha, so let's open our parentheses. So what do we want to save in the local storage? Well, I want to save the name of the user. And then what exactly do I want to save? Well, we need to first do json.stringify before we can save anything to the local storage. So json.stringify, and then I want to save the action.payload. Okay, so that's it for this one. Now the next thing, and probably the last thing we need to do, is to save all the user data. So you see this user here, we're going to save all the data, so I will just can just duplicate this, and then I'll just change the information here. This one is going to say save user. So save user, and of course I'm not going to be needing any local storage because I'm not saving the user to the local storage. So the first is the username. So but with this save user, we're going to get an object from the what's it called front end. We're going to get an object as a payload. So that object, I'll say const, and I'll say profile, and that's going to be equal to, this is now action dot payload. So action dot payload. Yeah, now this profile is going to contain all the details about the user, just an object that will contain the username, the user email, just like we did in the back end. So now I will now say state.name, and then I'll just point to this profile dot and whatever comes after. So here we're just going to change this and say state.name will now be profile dot name. Aha, so I'll just do the same for the remaining fields that I have. And this is not just going to be state.name, sorry, it's going to be state.user.name. Okay, so we are going one step down. So here I'll just come and correct that and say state.user.name. All right, so now we can just go ahead and duplicate this, I think 4 times, and then this is just going to be state.user. We're just going to do email here. Oh, sorry about that. Escape, name, and then email. Okay, so aha, then this one is now going to be, let's do the phone number, then this one will be the bio, then this one will be, oh okay, the photo. Aha, so just like that we've been able to handle, but I'm getting this guy here and I don't know what the problem is. Do I need to, oh okay, so let me find out why this red mark is here. I'm not quite sure why. Okay, so const profile action dot payload. I'm sure you may be seeing why that is, but let me just find out why. Oh, okay, I'm adding comma instead of closing, so that's what the problem is. So all these commas here, it just needs to be semicolon instead of a comma. That's so semicolon just to close it. You don't even need a semicolon in JavaScript anymore, but then I just use it because Visual Studio Code is going to add it anyway when I save. So that's about it for setting the action on our auth slides. Now the next thing we need to do is just to export this action, and if you may, we can even export the state. So first off, let's export the action. So you come here, you see that we already have this option here to export the action. So all you just need to do is to add the name of the action. So how many actions do we have? Well, we have 3. First of all, we are setting the login state. So set login. I've exported that. Then we're going to set the name of the user, set name. Then lastly, we're going to save the user, I think. Let me check. Set user rather. So here I'm going to set user. Aha, so those are the 3 actions that we have, and we have exported them. Then, like I said, you can also export the states individually from here. You can access them from the front end by themselves, but you can also export them here so that it's a little bit easier to access them. So let me show you how you can export them. So here I'll just say export, which needs to be in small letter, so export, and then const. So what do you want to export? Well, I want to create a variable called select, because that's like a convention. So you just add select to the name of that state. So the first one is logged in, like so, and that's going to be equal to, open your parenthesis and then state, and then we're just going to open it with an arrow function, and here we're just going to point to the state inside here. So it's going to be state dot auth dot is logged in, like so. So this is how you export an individual state. So we can do this for the remaining part of our states. So I think we have 2, and I'll just duplicate this down, and then here I'll just change this to select. This time I want to select the name of the user, so I'll say select name, and then this is going to be state.auth.name. Then next we're going to do for the user itself, that's the user object, so user, and this will be select user. Aha, so as far as the ID goes, I have not done anything with the ID so far, so I think I can actually get rid of it. If I ever need to do something with the ID, I'll just add it here. All right, so let's go ahead and save. And as far as we're concerned, these are all the actions that we need and the states that we need to store for the user. So okay, so everything is under control. So in the next video now, we're now going to start making requests to the back end to log in the user. All right, see you in the next one then.